Billionaire feigns sleep to test his maid's daughter. What she does leaves him speechless. The billionaire sat perfectly still, pretending to nap in his oversized leather chair. Across the room, the heavy safe door stood wide open, its shelves overflowing with neat stacks of cash, more money than most people would see in an entire lifetime. Thomas Mitchell's breathing was slow and steady, but his mind was sharp, watching everything through partially closed eyes. It was late evening when Diana, one of the company's longtime cleaning staff, arrived for her shift. At her side was her little girl, Jasmine, just 6 years old, who often accompanied her during school breaks. Jasmine wore tiny pink gloves, something her mother had bought so she could feel like she was helping. For weeks, Thomas had been planning this quiet test. After learning that his own business partner had siphoned off millions in secret, he had grown cynical, questioning whether anyone could truly be trusted. Now, 45, a self-made man with a vast empire, he wanted proof that honesty still existed. His plan was simple: leave temptation in plain sight and see what happened. As Diana went about her routine, dusting shelves and wiping down surfaces, Jasmine wandered closer to the desk. Her eyes widened at the sight of the fortune spread out before her. To a child who likely never held more than a few bills at once, it must have seemed like a fairy tale. Thomas braced himself, expecting the worst, or at least some kind of curiosity he'd have to correct. But then something entirely unexpected happened. Jasmine didn't reach for the money. Instead, she leaned closer, tilting her head at the messy stacks. Quietly, with careful fingers, she began to straighten the piles. She grouped the bills by size, smoothing them into neat bundles with a seriousness far beyond her years. "Mom," she said softly, "Mr. Thomas's money was all messy. I fixed it like you showed me when we sort our coins." Diana spun around, alarmed. "Jasmine, sweetheart, we don't touch things that don't belong to us." "But it was untidy," Jasmine replied, a little puzzled. "He'll like it better now." Thomas's chest tightened unexpectedly. In that small, simple act, he saw something he hadn't felt in a long time: pure integrity. This little girl, who lived with far less than he could imagine, didn't take even a single dollar. She had simply organized what wasn't hers, proudly explaining why. He couldn't know yet, but this quiet moment, a child's innocent gesture, was about to ripple far beyond the walls of that office, shifting how he saw people, wealth, and trust forever. The story of transformation was only just beginning, and the lessons ahead would prove that wisdom can come from the most unlikely places. Over the following weeks, Thomas kept a quiet eye on Diana and her daughter. What he saw surprised him. Diana worked relentlessly, splitting her time between his company at night and a medical office in the mornings. Through it all, little Jasmine was by her side, sometimes curled up with a book, sometimes completing her homework in a waiting room, always calm and well-behaved. But it wasn't the long hours that impressed Thomas most. It was the way Diana raised her daughter. One evening, as he passed by unnoticed, he overheard Diana's soft voice. "We give back what isn't ours, even when nobody's looking. Our integrity is worth more than any dollar." The words stayed with him. Diana's life had never been easy. Orphaned at 9 and placed in foster care, she worked her way through high school and tried to save for college, but the bills never stopped. At 22, she learned she was pregnant. The child's father vanished before Jasmine was born. Since then, she had stood on her own, refusing handouts or pity, determined to build a life for her little girl. Something about that resilience moved Thomas. Quietly, he instructed payroll to raise Diana's wages, framing it as a job reclassification so she wouldn't feel it was charity. But not everyone missed the change. During a finance review, Richard Blackwood, the company's vice president of operations, spotted the adjustment. Richard, 50 years old and born into wealth, had never worked a day without his family name clearing the path. Thomas, Richard said in the meeting, raising an eyebrow, why are we throwing extra money at janitorial staff, particularly that one woman? Because she's exceptional at what she does, Thomas replied evenly. Richard smirked, his tone dripping with disdain. You can call it exceptional if you want, but you start giving people like that more than they expect, and pretty soon they'll think they own the vault. It's just how they are. The words landed like acid. Thomas felt his jaw tighten, but he stayed composed. Richard wasn't just an employee. He was part owner and the son of a founder, and his influence had long shielded him from consequences. And another thing, Richard continued, his voice rising. She brings that kid into the office. A cleaning crew is one thing, but this isn't a playground. What kind of mother drags a child into a corporate building? It's unprofessional and shows a lack of proper upbringing. That evening, Thomas's patience was tested even further. Working late, Richard encountered Diana and Jasmine in a hallway. Thomas, watching discreetly from his office, saw it unfold. Listen, Richard said, his tone sharp and condescending. I know you're getting more than you're worth. I don't know what you're doing to get that pay bump, but whatever it is, it stops now. Diana froze, clutching her cleaning rag. Sir, I'm sorry. I don't understand. Of course you don't. People like you never do. You take what you can and keep quiet. And another thing, get that kid out of here. This is a workplace, not a nursery. Jasmine, frightened, pressed herself against her mother's leg. Diana put an arm around her protectively. I'm only here to do my job, she said quietly. Your job, Richard snapped, is to clean and stay out of sight. From the glass office above, Thomas's hands clenched on the armrest of his chair. The anger that surged through him wasn't just professional, it was personal. He had tolerated Richard's arrogance for years, but this was different. He had humiliated a hard-working woman and terrified a little girl who had done nothing wrong. That night, Thomas made up his mind. Observing from a distance was no longer enough. Richard Blackwood had revealed exactly who he was, and Thomas had the power to respond. Richard Blackwood had no idea that his own arrogance was about to become his downfall. What he didn't realize was that every word he spoke was being captured, not by gossip, but by technology he himself had authorized. The state-of-the-art surveillance system he had pushed to install in the company, claiming it was to improve employee accountability, was now quietly collecting evidence against him. But for Thomas Mitchell, a simple recording wasn't enough. He didn't just want Richard reprimanded. He wanted him exposed, humiliated, stripped of the power he had abused for far too long. This wasn't only about Diana and Jasmine anymore. It was about principle, about finally cutting down the rot that had been tolerated because of family names and shares in the company. As the anger in Thomas grew, so did his plan. He envisioned using Richard's own cruelty as the weapon that would bring him down. Every insult, every act of intimidation, every smug look, it was all ammunition. Thomas was done being passive. The next morning, as the city buzzed to life, Thomas made a call to an old ally. Marcus, he said into the phone, his voice calm but edged with steel, I need your help again. Marcus Chun, a former FBI investigator turned private consultant, had helped Thomas once before during a major embezzlement scandal. He was known for finding threads others missed and pulling them until the entire scheme unraveled. Trouble already? Marcus asked, a grin audible in his tone. This time it's personal, Thomas said. It's about racism, intimidation, and a man who thinks his position makes him untouchable. I need everything, proof, witnesses, patterns of behavior. Richard Blackwood has made a mistake. He went after the wrong people. Marcus gave a short, amused laugh. A spoiled heir throwing his weight around? Easy. They always leave a trail. Send me the details and give me 72 hours. While Marcus began digging, Richard's behavior became more aggressive. It was as though he sensed a challenge and doubled down, eager to crush what he saw as weakness. On Monday morning, he marched into the HR department with a self-satisfied smirk and a stack of fabricated complaints. "This employee," he said, referring to Diana, "has been late multiple times, and that child she drags around is disruptive. We need to take action." Sandra Miller, the HR director, a sharp, fair-minded woman in her 40s, looked up from the file she was reviewing. "Mr. Blackwood, Diana's record has been spotless for over 2 years. I've never received a single complaint." Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Records can be changed. I'm the vice president. My word should carry weight." Sandra's brow furrowed. Something wasn't right. But before she could press further, Richard turned on his heel and left, convinced his authority was unquestionable. Thomas, meanwhile, was watching. The same cameras Richard had demanded for staff monitoring were feeding the Billionaire live footage. Every condescending word, every manufactured accusation was neatly archived, time-stamped, and stored. By Wednesday night, Richard's cruelty escalated. He intercepted Diana and Jasmine as they arrived in the parking lot, stepping into their path like a guard dog. "Stop right there," he said coldly. "I know what you're doing. Whatever special favors you're giving for that extra pay, cut it out. This isn't that kind of company." Diana's heart pounded. Her cheeks flushed with shock and anger. "Sir, you're mistaken. I only do my job, nothing more." Richard's smile was thin and mocking. "Don't play innocent. People like you always have a price. I'm just wondering what yours is." Jasmine, clutching her mother's arm, whispered, "Mommy, why is that man so mean?" Diana knelt slightly, smoothing her daughter's hair, her voice calm but firm. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Some people are unhappy, and they try to make others feel the same way. But we don't let them." Richard chuckled cruelly. "Unhappy? Hardly. I have more money in my wallet right now than you'll see in your entire lifetime. Maybe that's why I'm cautious about people like you. Too much generosity, and suddenly the help thinks they belong." From his office window, Thomas saw it all, his hands tightening into fists. This wasn't corporate arrogance anymore. It was bullying. It was prejudice laid bare. And it was happening to two people who had done nothing but work hard and remain decent. In that moment, the decision Thomas had made the night before hardened into resolve. Richard thought his position made him untouchable, but Thomas was about to show him what real power looked like. That night, Thomas sat in his private office, the glow of the security screens illuminating his face. He watched the recordings of Richard's actions with a calm but simmering fury, each replay tightening the coil inside him. By the time Marcus arrived, with a thick folder under his arm, Thomas already knew he was dealing with something more dangerous than arrogance. Marcus dropped the dossier onto the desk. "You were right," he said, opening it to reveal files, screenshots, and court records. "This guy's not new to this game. He's been doing it for years. Look here. 3 separate employees filed formal complaints of harassment and discrimination at his previous companies. Black and Latino workers, mostly. He bullied them until they quit. In every case, the lawsuits were quietly settled out of court. His father signed the checks." Thomas turned each page carefully, his expression hardening with each revelation. "So this isn't a one-off, it's a pattern." "A pattern," Marcus said grimly, "that's been protected by money and family influence. His father moved him around whenever things got too hot, always keeping the records clean. Richard Blackwood is a predator with a corner office." Thomas's voice was quiet but icy. "I want everything. Phone logs, emails, social media. If he's ever sent a message, I want it. If he's ever said something offhand, I want it on tape. Build me a map of his behavior." Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're planning something big. Thomas leaned back in his chair, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I'm planning justice. By Thursday, an opportunity presented itself. Sandra Miller, the HR director, appeared at Thomas's office door, looking uneasy. Sir, she said, closing the door behind her, I need to discuss Richard Blackwood with you. He's pressuring me to terminate Diana. I've reviewed everything, and I can't find a single violation to justify it. It feels personal. Thomas feigned concern. Personal? In what way? He's claiming she's violating policies, but there's nothing on record. Yesterday he said, she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, that people like her shouldn't be near administrative areas after hours. That was all Thomas needed to hear. Sandra, if you believe there's bias or discrimination at play, document everything. Don't ignore a single detail. Start an internal investigation. You have my full backing. Her brow furrowed. But he's the vice president. And I'm the president, Thomas said firmly. Document everything. That night, Thomas moved to Phase 2. He quietly instructed the IT department to upgrade the security network, more cameras, more microphones, strategically placed in the areas Richard frequented. Officially, it was sold as a system enhancement. In reality, it was a snare waiting to spring. It didn't take long for results. Friday evening, when Richard assumed he was alone, his voice carried through the hidden audio feeds straight to Thomas's office. Dad, he said on the phone, his tone impatient. That cleaning woman. We need to get rid of her. She's getting too comfortable. Call your friends, pull some strings. Theft accusations, immigration checks, whatever it takes. People like that need to be reminded of their place. From the speaker, his father's voice sounded wary. Richard, this seems excessive. She's just staff. It's a matter of principle, Richard snapped. If you let one get bold, the rest will follow. It's better to handle it now. Thomas listened in silence, his hand tightening around his pen. He saved the audio file with a single click, his expression unreadable. By Monday, Marcus was back, carrying a briefcase heavy with more evidence. You won't believe this, he said. We went deeper into his digital life, private social media accounts, closed chat groups. He's been posting things that could end his career 10 times over. Racist memes, derogatory jokes about black employees, even bragging about sabotaging black candidates during hiring processes at other companies. 15 years worth of a man showing who he really is. He laid down printouts, messages where Richard wrote things like, you have to keep them in their place. Show dominance early or they'll start thinking they run things. Another read, no company ever got better by letting diversity run wild. Thomas scanned each page, his anger now sharpened into something cold and strategic. But Marcus wasn't done. He's also planning something this week. I intercepted texts. He's going to stage a theft, says he'll plant something valuable in her cart and catch her stealing. Then call security and make a scene. Wants to scare her enough to quit. Thomas's face darkened. What's he planting? A $15,000 Rolex, Marcus said. He's scheduled it for Tuesday night. For a moment, Thomas didn't speak. Then a thin smile spread across his face. Good. Let him. By Tuesday evening, Richard was moving like a man setting a snare. At precisely 8:00 p.m., he slipped into the office early, a small velvet box in hand. The security feeds caught every angle as he opened Diana's cleaning cart and nestled the Rolex beneath the supplies. Perfect, he muttered to himself, smug satisfaction on his face. 15 minutes, and I'll catch her red-handed. But what Richard didn't know was that the hunter had become the prey. Upstairs, Thomas sat in front of a bank of high-definition monitors, headphones over his ears. Marcus was outside in a surveillance van, every camera and mic synchronized. Even 3 journalists Thomas trusted were parked discreetly down the street, ready for the story of a lifetime. "Marcus," Thomas said over the radio, "he just planted it. All systems recording?" "Confirmed," came the reply. "We've got video, audio, and backup angles he doesn't even know exist." At 8:20, Richard made his move. Flanked by 2 security guards, he strode into the office where Diana was polishing a desk. Jasmine sat nearby, her little backpack open, pen, sills scattered as she worked on her schoolwork. "Mrs. Jefferson," Richard said with syrupy politeness that didn't hide the malice underneath, "we've had reports of missing property. I need to inspect your cleaning cart." Diana blinked, startled. "Sir, of course, but I've never—" "It's standard procedure," Richard interrupted smoothly. He walked straight to the cart, already knowing where to look. With exaggerated drama, he pulled out the Rolex, holding it up like evidence in a courtroom. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Diana's face went white. "I've never seen that watch before. I swear—" Richard's smile turned sharp. "Oh, I'm sure. It just magically appeared in your cart." From her chair, Jasmine's wide eyes filled with fear. "Mommy, what's happening?" "Be quiet, child," Richard snapped harshly. "Your mother has some explaining to do, and she's coming with us." Explain how those expensive items magically appeared in her materials? One of the security guards had already lifted the phone, following Richard's instructions to the letter. "Police," he said tersely. "We need to report a theft in progress." It was at that precise moment that the office door swung open. Thomas walked in, his posture steady and his expression unreadable. Behind him came Marcus, and with them were 3 other individuals Richard didn't immediately recognize. "Richard," Thomas said evenly, his voice carrying a calmness that somehow made the room feel colder. "I think you should hang up that phone." Richard straightened, relief flickering briefly across his face. "Thomas, perfect timing. We caught your employee stealing your watch." Thomas's response was not what Richard expected. He laughed, a short, cold sound that seemed to echo against the walls. "My watch? Richard, I've been wearing an Apple Watch for the last 5 years. I've never owned a Rolex in my life." The confidence on Richard's face began to crack. "What? What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Thomas replied smoothly, "that we have you on record planting that watch yourself, the very one you bought this morning to frame Diana. Marcus?" Marcus stepped forward, carrying a sleek tablet. With a few taps, he brought up high-definition security footage and held it where everyone could see. "Angle 1, he said, showing Richard clearly placing the watch into Diana's cart, glancing around to ensure he wasn't being seen. A swipe. "Angle 2, Angle 3, and here's a perfect shot of your face while you do it." Richard opened his mouth to argue, but Thomas raised a hand, silencing him. "Oh, but we're not done. Marcus, show him the scrapbook." Marcus connected the tablet to a portable projector, and the room dimmed slightly as the images appeared on a screen. "First," Marcus began, "your private comments." Screenshots filled the display. Hateful, racist posts written in Richard's own words. "Need to keep these monkeys in their place," Marcus read aloud. "That's yours, isn't it?" Diana gasped audibly, her hands flying to her mouth. Richard stepped forward as if to examine the screen more closely, but Thomas moved smoothly to block him. "Next," Marcus continued, "we have your conversations, planning to create legal problems for Diana, conspiring to fabricate evidence, even stating it's a matter of principle to make sure these people don't feel comfortable here." Richard's face was draining of color. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "From the security system you personally approved," Thomas said coolly. "It records everything, including your calls to your father about how to frame an innocent employee." At that, one of the previously unknown individuals stepped forward and flipped open a press badge. "Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7 News," she announced, her voice carrying authority. "Mr. Blackwood, would you care to comment on this evidence of systematic racial discrimination and conspiracy?" Richard blinked, realizing too late that the room was no longer private. "You can't use that," he shouted, panic rising. "I have rights." "Of course you do," Thomas said, voice steady as stone. "You have the right to remain silent, because anything you say now will not just be used against you by the police, who are already on their way, but also by the press, the company board, and Diana's attorneys." Marcus swiped again, and new documents appeared. Old HR records, complaint files, legal briefs. "And we're not stopping there. Here's a list of your previous misconduct. 15 years of discrimination across multiple companies, 3 lawsuits covered up by your father's influence, 8 Black and Latino employees you harassed into resigning." Thomas stepped closer, his tone dropping to something colder. "And best of all, Richard, we even have recordings you didn't know existed. Cameras caught you threatening Diana in the parking lot and making disgusting, unwanted advances toward her." A second journalist raised a camera, the red recording light blinking. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "how do you respond to allegations that you used your position to systematically target and harass minority employees, even going so far as to fabricate evidence?" The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's world, once so controlled, was collapsing around him, office that had become her favorite place. The little girl darted past a row of glass-walled meeting rooms, clutching a folder of colored paper. Her small footsteps echoed against the polished floors, drawing smiles from employees who had come to adore her cheerful visits. Diana followed at a calmer pace, her tailored blazer and confident stride a world apart from the janitor's uniform she once wore. 6 months had changed everything, not just her title, but her entire life. She had been the first to arrive this morning, as she always was, checking in on her team and reviewing the latest HR initiatives. But nothing gave her more joy than watching Jasmine grow up in an environment where she could dream without fear. Thomas Mitchell, now standing near the window of his expansive corner office, turned at the sound of the child's voice. His expression softened immediately. "Of course, Jasmine," he said, crouching slightly to meet her at eye level. "What masterpiece have you brought me today?" Jasmine proudly opened the folder to reveal a drawing, a tall building with shining windows, a smiling woman in a suit holding hands with a little girl, and beside them, a man with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes. "This is Mommy," she explained, pointing. "And this is you, Mr. Thomas. And that's our company. I made the windows extra shiny because Mommy says we make everything better now." For a moment, Thomas was speechless. The drawing was simple, but it carried a weight he couldn't ignore. He glanced at Diana, who looked both embarrassed and proud, her eyes misty but her smile steady. "You know," he said, addressing both mother and daughter, "this is going straight on my wall, but Jasmine, I think we should put another frame next to it. One day, it'll be your turn to run a company like this, and I want proof that you've been preparing since you were 7. Jasmine giggled, not fully understanding, but sensing the kindness in his voice. Diana's throat tightened. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell," she said quietly, though the gratitude she felt was far greater than the words could show. Later that afternoon, as she reviewed employee scholarship applications, Diana thought about the journey behind her, the humiliation she endured, the courage she found when Marcus stepped forward, and the steady, unwavering support Thomas had shown. The woman who once swept floors now sat at the table where policies were written, shaping the company's culture. She knew the world outside still had its share of prejudice and injustice, but within these walls, she was proof that dignity and skill could triumph over malice. That evening, as the office lights dimmed, Diana locked her door and took Jasmine's hand. "Ready to go home?" she asked. "Yes," Jasmine said, swinging her arm happily. "But, Mommy, can we come back tomorrow? I like it here." Diana smiled, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "We will, sweetheart, because this isn't just my office anymore. It's ours." And as they walked out together, the halls seemed to echo not with footsteps, but with possibility. second home. She attended the best private school in town and already spoke fluently about wanting to be a lawyer, inspired by the way Mr. Thomas had fought for them. Thomas smiled, watching the complete transformation of their lives. A family once written off now, thriving, confident, and unstoppable. His company had become a national benchmark for inclusion and diversity, winning awards and changing industry standards. The Fair Chance program, created in honor of Diana's case, had already benefited more than 200 families, opening doors for people who had been overlooked or underestimated for far too long. Meanwhile, Richard Blackwood lived in a very different world. After serving 18 months in prison for racial discrimination and conspiracy, he emerged to find everything gone. His reputation was in ruins. No reputable company would hire him. His wife filed for divorce and took half of their remaining assets. His children legally changed their last name and cut off all contact. The man who once held the title of vice president in a powerful corporation now worked as a used car salesman, earning less in an entire year than Diana made in 3 months. His racist posts, once shared in arrogance, continued to circulate online like a permanent stain, preventing any attempt to rebuild his image. One evening, during dinner in the beautiful new home Thomas had bought for them, Jasmine looked up with wide, curious eyes. "Dad, Mr. Thomas," she said shyly, "our teacher asked us to write about our heroes. Can I write about you?" Thomas felt a lump in his throat. "Jasmine," he said gently, "the real hero of this story is your mother. She taught you that honesty is worth more than any amount of money." Diana reached across the table and took his hand. "No, Thomas. The hero is the man who had the courage to fight when it would have been easier to ignore." The following week, Thomas received an unexpected call. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Michael Torres from CNN. We'd like to do a feature on how your company became a model of inclusion after the Blackwood case." When the story aired during prime time, it touched millions. The cameras showed Jasmine playing in the office where it all began, Diana thriving in her new role, and Thomas explaining how a 6-year-old had changed his understanding of justice and humanity. Somewhere across town, Richard watched the broadcast from his small one-bedroom apartment. Alone, drink in hand, he saw everything he once controlled. Wealth, power, prestige, now flourishing without him. He tried to call former colleagues, but they had blocked his number. He created new social media accounts, only to have his old racist posts resurface each time like ghosts of his past. 3 years later, on Jasmine's 10th birthday, Thomas made a special announcement at the celebration. Surrounded by friends, family, and employees, he stood and spoke. "Jasmine Diana, you have changed my life in ways I can never fully repay. That is why I have created the Jasmine Jefferson Educational Fund, which will provide college scholarships to talented young black students for the next 50 years. The little girl ran to hug him, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for believing in us when no one else did." That same day, Richard was filling out an application for a job at a gas station. When the manager Googled his name, the infamous article about his case appeared, and he was politely turned away. His downfall had been so complete, so public, that it became a case study in business schools about how arrogance, prejudice, and entitlement can destroy an entire career and a life. Thomas eventually understood something profound. True revenge is not in someone else's ruin, but in building something bigger than they could ever imagine. He turned an ordinary company into a symbol of justice, created opportunities for hundreds of families, and proved that integrity and kindness lead to lasting prosperity. The honesty of a 6-year-old taught me that the best response to hatred is love and action, Thomas said years later during a speech at Harvard University. Richard tried to bring us down, but he ended up lifting us to heights we never dreamed possible. Today, Jasmine is preparing for Harvard, full of dreams and confidence. Diana has earned her MBA and is nationally recognized for her innovations in human resources. Thomas has been honored by the government for his contributions to racial equality in corporate America. And Richard? He still lives alone, working odd jobs, remembered only as a cautionary tale, a man whose prejudice cost him everything. In the end, true justice was not Richard's imprisonment or financial ruin. It was the living proof that kindness, courage, and determination build legacies that inspire generations. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that remind us doing good is always worth it, even when it feels impossible.